Good morning. I want to welcome everyone to the Green Chemistry and Chemical Stewardship Online Certificate Program information session. This is our first one for the year for our program for 2019 going into 2020. And I am joined this morning by Pam Eliason from the Toxic Use Reduction Institute at University of Massachusetts at Lowell. Hi, Pam.
Hi.
My name is Jill Teep. I'm from the University of Washington, and I am hosting this session as well as your administrator for this certificate program. And this is a program of the Northwest Center for Occupational Health and Safety. We're really glad to have you join us, and we are recording this session for further review at another time. If you have a question at any time, go ahead and type it into that chat box, and I will go ahead and host your question, and we'll see what Pam thinks about whatever you are thinking about for this certificate program, for yourself, for your friend, or how you might work this. Include this kind of work in your workplace or in your daily life. So with that, we're going to go ahead and talk about the structure of the program a little bit, what a certificate is useful for, and then we'll kind of dive a little bit deeper into what the program entails, what some of the nuts and bolts of the participating in the program look like, and then we'll have some time to ask questions of Pam as an instructor. And then I just also want to let people know that I am also not only an administrator, but last year I actually took the course myself. So as a student, I think it's really important to see that perspective, and it was really fun experience, as well as something that's been really helpful as well in my life. So with that, let's just dive into what this program is all about. All right, so I went ahead and introduced ourselves. I'm Jill Teep again, Pam Eliason here with you as well. So what is a certificate program? So a certificate program is unlike an academic degree program. It's focused on continuing education in a particular field. It's a linked series of courses that adds into a body of knowledge about a certain discipline. And it's primarily designed for post-baccalaureate participants, but there are exceptions to that, of course. It was developed initially by the University of Washington's Professional and Continuing Education program, as well as an advisory board of government, nonprofit, private companies across the board, all over the Northwest. And we had groups like REI, Boeing, we had Intel, Department of Ecology, University of Washington, all sorts of different expertises who all care about this issue, pull together this content, and this will be going into our fourth year. These courses, our instructors are approved by the University of Washington as well. And then why earn a certificate? So the courses contain really practical information that's relevant to professionals working in the field. So I think that's one thing that's special around continuing education in general. Instead of you getting a large body of knowledge about one discipline, this is really something you can take away working knowledge from, which is what makes it so helpful in a professional development arena. The instructors are recognized authorities in the professional community. We're really proud of our instructors. And it's an opportunity to enhance or update your skills and knowledge from other professionals. I think what makes a program like this kind of unique is that you get a chance to interact with other folks who are taking the course at the same time with you as part of your cohort. A certificate credential can help facilitate your career development. Going and getting another degree can be a long time commitment, a large financial commitment, and a certificate is a nice work compatible way to expand your possibilities and growth. I mentioned the cohort-based piece of this. It's actually been really remarkable to me to see the people that you are in the class with will post information around a discussion session around a topic that maybe you care about or didn't know anything about, and you'll get a chance to interact with that information. They'll get a chance to interact with you and add to your body of knowledge, and before you know it, you've got 5 friends out in the industry who are doing this kind of work that can be a resource to you now and going forward in your career. And it's really impressive how that happens really naturally, and it's kind of exciting. The networking piece is really important. The schedule is really flexible and the delivery is really flexible. It's all online. We'll talk about how it breaks down week to week a little bit further into this webinar today. Less in time financial commitment than a degree program, like we mentioned before, and it's an academic credential endorsed by the university. So what will you learn? You'll be learning about reducing harmful substances through material decision-making and chemical design, overcoming common disconnect between chemical properties, toxicity, and human health. And you'll consider how these factors influence material selection with consideration paid to viable business decisions. It's got to be financially viable. Learn about how to identify sustainability issues related to green chemistry practices and how to apply your newly acquired knowledge and skills to promote chemical stewardship. Really boils down to green chemistry, toxicology, and then the business side as well. So the certificate program is comprised of 3 courses, and it runs through fall, winter, and spring quarters. You can take these courses out of order, but we encourage you to take them in this order. It's a little bit easier to work with your cohort across those 3 courses, and they do build on each other. But that said, they are standalone courses as well. And then all 3 courses are required to receive the certificate. So we start off in September with sustainability, toxicity, and human health. And the winter quarter, we dive deep into principles of green chemistry. And then the spring quarter, we talk about assessment tools for safer chemical decisions. And that's the course that Pam Eliason teaches. And again, everything is available in an online format. So that first course for fall, we have Grace Lasker, who is a professor at the University of Washington, Bothell. She has a background in nursing. She is our go-to person around at the university for partnerships around green chemistry and opportunities to expand to different disciplines as well. And we have Kevin Wilhelm, who's the CEO of Sustainable Business Consulting. He is our guru around the business case for sustainability. He provides that kind of service all over the US and internationally, and then also is really helpful at helping people connect these ideas to that real world impact. So we talk about sustainability as a key driver of innovation. We talk about the fundamental ways that the human body interacts with chemicals, predictive toxicology, risk and exposure, a lot of these like basics of toxicology. A lot of people come into these courses with either a strong chemistry background, or maybe a strong tox background, or maybe another scientific field background. So beefing up some of those basics on, especially toxicology, was really eye-opening for myself. Is something that I was seeing that connection really makes this whole field way more meaningful, I think. You talk about the human health risks regard to chemical agents and all those possible impacts that could happen. And we investigate environmental hazards, BPA, mercury, pesticides, so many examples, how all of these things interact. The second course is over winter quarter and starts in January. It's Principles of Green Chemistry. This is with Richard Morgan. He's a senior process chemist at Monumental, and Carolina Meller, who's with the Yale Center for Green Chemistry and Green Engineering, with Paul Anastas. For anyone who's into green chemistry, we get really nerdy about Paul as well. He was also part of the committee that put together this course in the beginning. I should mention that, just to name drop in the green chemistry world. Thanks, Pam, for laughing at that. So in this quarter, we're really going to learn about identifying chemicals by class. We're going to kind of go back to those basics of chemistry and dive into what pieces of that chemistry you remember from your undergrad training that may come back up in this context. So we're going to dive back in and bring you back up to speed with that. I needed a little more time there myself when I went through those modules. It was good to awaken those principles for myself. And then you also investigating the transport and fate of toxicants in the environment and models for prediction and biological systems. This is where this is really interesting to talk about that predictive piece of it. We'll dive a little bit deeper into that into this course as well. And then we'll talk about persistence and bioaccumulation factors and ecological risk. And then we'll talk about the history and current role of chemical regulations in society, environment, and our economy. The 12 principles of green chemistry will, of course, be covered, talking about their role in innovation, which is also a really fascinating topic, analyzing the efficiency of various approaches to chemical design. Then we'll review some more of that basic chemistry piece that I mentioned before. And we'll start talking about identifying green chemistry alternative solvent systems, which is also a really interesting topic that is widely used in especially a lot of the biotech sphere and a lot of different other industries. So this is a really important one to spend some time on. And then finally, understanding guidelines for designing chemicals that have lower inherent toxicity while investigating case studies for designing safer chemicals. Getting down to that bread and butter of how do we start thinking this direction towards safer chemistries. And then finally, in the spring, with Pam Eliason, who you've met and we have on the line today, we'll be talking about alternative assessment methodologies and accompanying decision rules, as well as the US EPA alternative assessment methodology. OSHA's toolkit for transition to safer chemicals, which is a fantastic toolkit that pulls together a lot of different tools that exist out in the world now. We'll talk about decision-making frameworks for selecting chemicals. When I took the course, this one was really fascinating for me because I was familiar with some of these tools to evaluate chemicals or processes, but I had not seen some of these things around decision-making frameworks for how do I decide if this is better or not, because we don't want to end up in a regrettable substitution scenario. So this idea of a framework to make those choices was really valuable and was really eye-opening for myself as well. We'll also talk about chemical hazard assessment tools in use by regulators, manufacturers, retailers. There's different tools for different applications. There's a lot out there. So this is a really important discussion, and Pam does a great job of organizing that information and making it something you can find really useful. Case studies around all of these topics will be there as well. Talk about the history of third-party evaluation tools, really important, advantages, disadvantages, and who's using them now. And then we'll talk about life cycle thinking and life cycle management. And then finally, there's a capstone project to evaluate a chemical product within a sustainable framework. This is a great chance for you to exercise your interests. So what's nice about the assignments there that happen during the course is that you can choose either something that you're working on at work. Maybe there's a chemical or process you already want to evaluate. You can start using those ideas throughout the coursework, or you can explore something brand new that is new to you that's not part of your daily use, or maybe something at home that you use. Maybe there's a household product that you've been curious about and it's time to do this evaluation process. So there's a chance to connect this to your needs on a couple levels. So with that, I want to introduce Pam again. Hi, Pam.
Hi.
So
More
Pam,
gray hair than I have in that picture, I see.
oh.
It happens.
Can you talk a little bit why you got involved with this certificate program and why you are interested in teaching this course?
Well, I've been doing alternatives assessment since 2005. When I work with the Toxic Use Reduction Institute, and in Massachusetts, the legislature tasked us with assessing whether or not there were safer alternatives to some chemicals that the local community and advocacy groups were very concerned about. So we really dove into it then, and it was sort of a first time thing, certainly for us, and I think it was a kind of project that really hadn't been done by states prior to that. We learned a lot, and we learned that there's a lot more to learn. And what's fascinating about this field is that it is constantly evolving. Mm-hmm. I'm interested in this course because I think it's a great opportunity to familiarize more and more people with the process of assessing alternatives to toxic chemicals to determine if they're in fact safer and feasible. And you know, companies are not going to implement a change if the change isn't feasible or affordable. Mm-hmm. So I think it's really important to have more and more champions out in the field who can apply these things that we're learning to their companies and their lives in a way that'll help move us forward towards safer and safer alternatives. So lots of reasons to want to be part of this.
And can you talk about a little bit more about your background, what brings you to this kind of work?
Yeah. So I got a degree in chemical engineering, and I remember my senior year being at a party, which, you know, and some guy saying to me, "So you engineer chemicals? That sounds really awful." And I thought, you know, what a dummy. But then I thought about it, and yeah, it does sound kind of awful if you're not paying attention to what those chemicals are. I ended up working as an environmental engineer, and I spent many years as a consultant. I learned a lot about how chemicals are being used in a lot of different applications, and it's fascinating. It's a challenge that companies face, working with the right chemicals and products and materials so that they can achieve the performance of whatever that is that they're doing. It's a big challenge. So, I mean, I learned a lot there, but I also didn't love the consulting side of things after a while.
Sure.
I did, and in that time, I became a toxic use reduction planner, which is a whole other thing in Massachusetts, a very specific credential, and just, really found that to be the most interesting part of what I was doing. And toxic use reduction, which is a Massachusetts thing, is alternatives assessment. But alternatives assessment and the tools that we talk about in this course are broader and more focused on assuring that you have options that are in fact safer. Anyway, it's a long story, but I joined the Toxic Use Reduction Institute eventually, and I just have really been so happy to be able to be part of the process of training more and more professionals and champions in this.
Yeah. And Tory has a great reputation everywhere. Like I'd heard of Tory before I had met you through this program as well. So I am excited that you are on board for this as well.
Thank you.
So let's dive a little bit into the nuts and bolts of the course and of the certificate. Can you talk a little bit about the availability of instructors or additional resources attached to this online course?
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, I can speak about my availability, and I'm assuming that I am, let's consider me to be the low bar. I think with the other courses, you've got a couple people there, and so you probably have even more. I try to be available. I mean, obviously, I have a day job, so I try to check in every evening and on the weekends, and I try to be as responsive as possible, particularly to people who have questions that they just want to ask outside of a discussion group kind of a forum. Though I think that discussion group for questions is a really great thing, because as you said earlier, Jill, there is so much knowledge in the room.
Yeah.
So much knowledge, so much information, and the networking is really fabulous.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I try to be really available. We were just talking earlier about how it's important to try to keep this curriculum current, and providing resources that reflect sort of the latest and greatest in alternatives assessment is important. So, I'll always be kind of working towards keeping those things as current and relevant as possible. But it's all relevant and really important stuff.
And it is true. It's a fast evolving field. I can remember just a few years ago, I think when I saw that OSHA made a toolkit, that's when I'm like, oh wow, okay, OSHA's really paying attention to this now, and that's when I feel like, wow, we're really going to start running with this, and that's what's been so exciting, I think, in the last few years as well. Yeah. So can you give an example of we're talking about this format of the course a little bit more, but it works in module form. So every 2 weeks, a new module gets unlocked, and there's content there to learn about, and then there's usually an assignment that goes with that. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. But can you give us an example of what a typical assignment might be like? And then also, can you talk about what an example of what someone has maybe turned in that was interesting? Because I remember as a student being kind of impressed by at least the discussion sessions, what some people would create. They were practically publishable papers sometimes, but some of them were really just real talk about where they were at too. So maybe you could give an example of an assignment. I mentioned the discussion forum. Maybe there's something else, an assignment example that comes to mind.
Sure. Yeah, no, I mean, it's really true. The people who are taking this certificate course are really top-notch people, and I've learned so much. So discussion is a really important part of it, and so each of the modules has a question posed that is designed to really spark some thought and some back and forth, and I try to kind of keep that going by responding to people's discussion posts as well. So the discussions are all really interesting. The assignments themselves range from, just kind of tell us what you're interested in, to use this tool and try to assess whether or not this chemical is hazardous and just how hazardous it is. So it's a pretty big range of assignment problems. culminating in that capstone that you mentioned, which is a really good practicum kind of a project where you do it both for an existing, for an example where there's already a lot of information present, and then you do it for something that you are interested in yourself. The topics that people are interested in ranges so wildly that it's really been interesting. From what are the chemicals being used in cooling tower applications, which, somebody who was working for a power plant was really interested in what are my options and what can we do? And again, when you are looking for an alternative to doing something the way it's always been done, you need to make sure that whatever you come up with is safer, but is also effective and affordable. And that is challenging.
Mm-hmm.
The trade-offs that are associated with any kind of a decision vary from situation to situation. And so, somebody talking about whether or not there are safer cosmetic and beauty products, personal care products, would have a very different set of kind of trade-offs and considerations than somebody looking at a real industrial application like the cooling towers. So, it's kind of all over the place and really fascinating. I learn a lot every single time.
I remember when I was doing the assignments, I would kind of bounce between, personal care things that I was always curious about, and then my background's in biotech and protein chemistry. So then I would bounce back and forth with like really wildly different topics, but it was really satisfying to be able to explore both or either or none. And I could always pick something fresh. And I always loved hearing what other ideas people had that I would learn a lot about. They would come up with an alternative that I'd never heard of before. And then I'm like, oh, that might actually apply for something I'm working on too, which was really helpful.
Right. And that's the beauty of these tools that we talk about, is that they are flexible enough that you can apply them in a wide range of applications, right?
Yeah.
And that's really important. That's a good sign for any tool that the situation you're applying it to doesn't affect its ability to give you some useful information.
Yes, absolutely. Overall, what content from the course do you think is the most valuable for working professionals? Is there something that kind of stands out for you, like about what value this brings to someone's work?
So, yeah, there's a lot about tools and how do you use the tools, and that's important, and that can be very useful. I think what's more important is helping people to really think about when it is and when it is not useful in making a decision. Mm-hmm. So going through a very exhaustive review of all of the data and putting it into this tool and coming out with a number might be a really helpful experience for you, for your company, and might be really helpful information for making a decision. And it might not be. But the process is useful. What's really useful, though, I think, is learning how to discern what matters and what doesn't in any given situation. So, does it matter that I have a data that I don't have data for certain chemical hazards associated with a chemical or a product? It might or it might not. So when do you figure that out? Who am I trying to convey this information to, and what do they care about? Am I talking to regulators? Am I talking to consumers? And what is the information that I need to build out and understand better in order to help those people understand my choices? Mm-hmm. So it's a lot of critical thinking that I think is the key, as opposed to your ability to use any given tool well.
Yeah. In your opinion, there's certificate programs, there's all sorts of continuing education and professional development out there for folks. We know that this program is unique in its kind of things that it's looking to teach people about green chemistry, toxicology, and the business case for these items and how to do it. Right. Can you talk about what what you feel makes this certificate program unique.
Well, again, I think that the networking is really critical. I think that the alternatives assessment world, the world of people out there trying to move us towards safer chemicals and products, is still relatively small.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and so you have the opportunity to get to know the people who are going to be the movers and shakers and innovators.
Sure.
Next month or 5 years from now. But, these are the people who are interested in moving industry and moving our products towards a more sustainable, outcome. And so I think that that's a really critical part, and that's one of the things that makes this certificate program, I think, so important.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the focus on toxicity, on green chemistry, on tools is really, really great. I think the inclusion of the business aspect is so key. You can identify the perfect solution to help you get rid of a toxic chemical you're concerned about. And if you can't convince the business decision makers why that matters and why it should be done and why it makes sense to them, it's all for naught. So I think that the inclusion of that business sense in the overall certificate program is so key.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. And then let's see. How do you see people using information they gain out of the course or from the program overall out in the world? How do you see people using this in a practical way?
Mm-hmm. Well, I got to tell you, I have met with several of my former students at conferences, and if I've had them come and visit us here in our office. Yeah,
that's great.
And these are people who are in industry. And the companies are interested in moving towards, creating a safer work environment, creating safer set of products, and working within a supply chain that is moving towards a more sustainable, aspect. So they're using what they're learning here to help their companies in that forward movement. I think that we've had several people from different retailers who have used what they've learned here to help their buyers make better decisions. And there are people who are not currently working, who are really applying what they're learning in this course towards their own lives, and I think making a difference in a more personal level. But these are the champions. These are the people who are really going to be making difference in a way that is so important to our world.
Absolutely. Thank you, Pam. That's fantastic. I love hearing that you've had some follow-up with folks too. That makes me really excited to hear that, because I think at the end of the day, we all hope that this will be impactful for everyone.
Yeah, it's helped me.
Yeah, that's great. So we're going to now talk about a little more kind of nuts and bolts of the class and what it looks like for folks, so that they can see if this is a good fit for them. So what to expect? Each course is a 5-credit class. It's 3 of the classes to complete the program. It is self-paced for each of the modules, of which there's 5 modules per course, about every 2 weeks. You can expect to spend about 5 to 10 hours per week on these modules. That number really fluctuates depending on kind of your level of interest. There's lots of different resources that are parked in these, and you can explore every single one and spend more time. Or if it's something you're already pretty comfortable with, you can spend a lot less time. So it is self-paced in that regard. You can access these materials at any time within the 2 weeks of that module, any hour of the day, any time zone. So there's one assignment with each of the modules. Sometimes there's an additional quiz or some other piece with that. And then the course materials are available, as I mentioned, once that module has been opened. And then there is a deadline basically every 2 weeks for turning an assignment, with few exceptions. But just about every 2 weeks is when some work will be due. So the kind of folks that we have applying and that have participated over the last few years are engineers, chemists, material scientists, product managers, supply chain procurement professionals, sustainability consultants, coordinators, environmental managers, health and safety professionals, risk managers, formulators. I would also add to this list. There are people who are consulting in a lot of different realms, different industries, and they're from every type of industry, and then also from governments and as well as nonprofits as well. So we have a little bit of everything as far as who ends up applying for this program. Prereqs, it's designed for people who have a 4-year degree and at least 2 years of professional experience. And we ask for a basic knowledge of chemistry equivalent to a basic chemistry level chemistry course. So there are exceptions to this. And again, you can, maybe if the chemistry piece is something you have less experience on, maybe that's a module you want to spend a little more time on. So there are ways to work with this as well, but those are what we recommend who will be most comfortable with this content. And as far as applying, you just go to our website, osha.washington.edu. A link will be sent out to you with that information as well. And there's a lot of info in our Green Chemistry Chemical Stewardship online certificate program. You can get there through that site. And there'll be a lot more content in there about this sort of FAQs, other videos that talk about the work and diving a little bit deeper. Once you create an account on our site, you go ahead and register for one or all 3 of the courses at the same time. And our registration deadline is about 2 weeks before the start of the course. And so that deadline will be, and that's something we can, we'll let you know in a follow-up email as well. And as I mentioned, you can take these courses out of order, but we encourage you to do them in order as they kind of build on each other. Each course is $910, and this includes 5.0 CEUs. And then once you go ahead and add those things to your cart, you go ahead and check out like you would for any other e-commerce site. And then about 2 weeks before the course, you'll be provided with login information to access the course learning environment. And that's a little bit of a process, and I'll work with you through it. We can, we'll get you all set up there. And then registration, the last chance to register for course 1 is September 22nd. So keep that date in mind. It's good to go ahead and do it right away, but September is when we get started. So if you have any other questions, again, I'm Jill. I manage and admin this program. My email is jstod@uw.edu. Go ahead and shoot me an email, and I'd love to chat more about it. I can connect you with any of the instructors. Maybe you want to hear what another student had to say about their experience. I'll be happy to connect you there as well. So with that, thank you so much for your time, Pam. I really appreciate it. We're so lucky to have you, and good luck with the remaining modules left in this quarter right now. So we've got a great group that are working hard and learning a lot. So thank you for your efforts, and thank you for joining us today, folks. We'll talk to you later.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.